Tired of hearing follow your passion when all you see are job descriptions that sound like a snowfest? Gen X, Y, Z, and all the alphabet plethora, we've got you. In this video, we are debunking the myth that your dream job has to be grand, life-changing adventure. Welcome to PhD with Woman on It, Hack the Future. My name is Beata Young, and today's PhD Positivity Hack delivered will be by our guest, Tracy Brower. Topic: forget, follow your passion. Your dream job might be hiding in plain sight. Episode 156 starts here. Let me remind you, this is a grassroots community that focuses on women on IT, an inclusive forum of women in technology, startups, and female leaders who are supported by men as well. And I bring heart to that hustle because empathy is my motto, and empathy is critical when you are building your dream career. First, let me remind you about the great thing that's been happening in our world. Happy birthday and congratulations to Jonah Anderson for winning the Arbetsutveklare Award of Developers Day in Stockholm. I'm sorry if I spelled that award wrong. Sweden, we love you. Hope you're staying hot and wishing you all the best, Jonah. Join our former PhD guest and founder of Make Love Not Porn, Cindy Gallop, this October 15th till 18th in New York City for the Black Week Conference, where she will be one of the speakers. Best of luck, Cindy. And hooray to Flutter engineer Maureen Josephine for being one of the speakers at the upcoming Women in Tech Summit on November 21st, 22nd. We are excited to hear your pitch and learn more about what you're doing in tech. Now let's go back to our topic. Forget, follow your passion. Your dream job might be hiding in plain sight. Discover how to spot hidden gems in everyday jobs. Unlock your hidden talents and turn your meh career into a wow experience. We're talking about finding purpose, passion, and a paycheck all at the same time. No fairy tales, just real world examples and advice. In this episode, we explore how to turn your job into a source of joy. Our amazing returning guest, Dr. Tracy Brower, is sociologist and author of The Secrets of Happiness at Work and Bring Work to Life. With her extensive career experience, Dr. Brower offers actionable strategies to embrace meaningful work and create a fulfilling career every single day. Tracy, it's a pleasure and honor to have you again. Where in the world are you joining us from today?
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and honor to join you again. I'm actually coming to you from Indianapolis, Indiana today. I am at one of our dealers and we have an event tonight. So it's wonderful to spend some time with you.
It's great to have you. We are in different format, as some of our audience can see. No longer vertical. Horizontal. Now it's vertical, but we are still going to give you nuggets of information and actionable points because, I had a conversation with Alex Medana about working hard, and he says we have been oversold work-life balance. There is only life. Our brains and body do not compartmentalize a life outside of work and work. Cortisol knows no barrier. What do you say to that?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I always say work is part of a full life. And there's this wonderful data on spillover as well. We all know if you are happy in your work, that tends to spill over to the rest of your life. But the opposite is also true. When you're happier outside of work, doing your volunteer work and all of your contributions to community and family and friends, that actually changes your perception of your work and you feel more positively about it. But work is part of a full life. It's how we think about esteem. It's how we think about our contribution. It's how we express our talents. And so there really is less compartmentalization than we might think. And that's a good thing because it's a whole continuum in terms of our life experience.
And I actually mentioned to Alex that it's more work-life integration, which in the world of technology, we know that, you have to have a perfect balance, but it's never going to be perfect because you have to tweak things and fix code and make sure that it is a work in progress. Now, speaking about work in progress, when I think about Gen Z, which is the biggest obstacle now because they really want to have a vision, a purpose, and they demand more and more from work. So, what would be your approach? Is there a different approach to boomers versus Gen Z?
Yes, absolutely. What's really interesting is if you look at the data about generations, we can think about life stage as more important actually than age. And we all have similar priorities in terms of what we want from our work, but those priorities shift in terms of their order depending on our life stage. So when we're earlier life stage, like Gen Zs, the number one thing that Gen Zs want from their work is a sense of purpose, a sense of development, visibility, and the opportunity to build social capital. Mid stage, we're threading the needle. We've got, elder care and child care and all the things. The number one thing we want is support for performance. Get in, get out, do the daycare dash at 5, do the elder care dash at 5. Late stage, people really prioritize leaving a legacy, being part of the organizational memory, mentoring others. We all care about all of those things, but we sometimes, as I mentioned, put them in different priority order. The other thing to know is that Gen Z struggles most with issues related to mental health, burnout, challenges with things like depression, anxiety. We all struggle with those, but Gen Z struggles the most. So when we can create the conditions for psychological safety, when we can create the conditions where they can be comfortable with discomfort, try new things, innovate because they know we have their backs and we're supporting them, that is also really, really effective for Gen Z.
It's great examples. However, how do we create that? How do we create the safety net for those who enter in the market, never had experience working in a very vibrant office environment, whether it's online or hybrid work? How do we create that dream job for them?
Yeah. So one of the first things we can do is we can give them meaningful work. Like, I think one of the challenges is that sometimes if people are new, we may not give them enough to do or give them enough challenges to face. So number one, give them hard things, give them interesting work, give them meaningful work. I think another thing is to give them feedback and coaching, to stay close in terms of saying, gosh, this went really well, or wow, we could have done this one a little bit differently. Stay close, give them feedback, give them coaching. Also, give them the opportunity to connect with other team members. So set up opportunities for a buddy to be available to them. Set up opportunities for a mentor to be available to them. Connections and our feeling of community, our feeling of being seen, our feeling that somebody's paying attention are significantly correlated with happiness. So when we can set up the conditions for people to feel that connection and to have those opportunities for relationship, that moves the needle as well. And the last thing I would say is that we can absolutely give them opportunities for ongoing development and stretch. Give them opportunities to learn, give them transparency in where their pay will develop, give them transparency in what succession planning or classes or training or development opportunities might be. They really value those kinds of things as well.
These are very good and valid points because, after all, everybody wants to be supported, noticed, and be part of the team. And now we know that depression gets really tricky to deal with. I mean, mental health is a very sensitive topic, and throughout pandemic, we've seen that many people had to reestablish their career path on or change the way they lived. So I'm just wondering, in case you recognize that somebody may not be quite performing as they used to be, and they are maybe suffering mental health issues, how would you suggest approaching this person and making sure that they are not being pinpointed or on the spotlight, because it's such a delicate topic, but at the same time you want to make sure that people feel supported and they are at their best?
You have said it. It's a balance, right? Like we need to be really sensitive to what people might be going through. I think the biggest thing is when people feel like you're paying attention, like you are noticing them and how they're doing. And we don't have to be social workers to each other, but we can check in and ask questions. Gee, how are you doing today? Or, how is it going? And we can take cues from people about how much they might want to chat with us. And we don't necessarily have to solve their problems, but we can provide resources. So we might be able to refer them to an expert in the organization. We might be able to refer them to an EAP, an employee assistance program kind of thing. We can make sure that we continue to check in and make sure too that we're holding them accountable. Like, I think this is one of the balancing acts. One of the things we might think of is, oh, I'm going to give somebody lots of space and lots of opportunity to kind of feel better and deal with whatever they're dealing with. But people also want to know that they matter, that we want their brain in the room, that we want their deliverable, that we want them to show up. So it's a balance of giving people enough space and time and opportunity to work through whatever they're working through, and privacy to do that, and to let them know that we absolutely still value and need their contribution and their opportunity on the team and their contribution to the team. So that's another thing as well, is finding that balance.
Finding the balance, the integration, and we have a great support from our audience. So let's talk about some of our comments here. We've got Natalie, who says, hello, Beata, and hello, Dr. Tracy Brower, my favorite PhD guest. Thank you, Natalie. I'm glad you enjoy watching and listening to Dr. Tracy. And we have Olga Vasina, who says, great to see you back, Tracy. And my POV, that would be my husband, who says, great place to start a speedy conversation from Tracy Brower. Hashtag Indie. There you go. Thank you very much for your support. Now, Tracy, we talked about the fact that we need to find passion. However, it's not really a task of finding passion when you have a job description that looks very corporate. How do we find the job that will be fulfilling, knowing that they are asking, and you need to have Excel sorted out, and the job description doesn't really inspire passion?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think one of the things we can do to find passion wherever we are is to try to say yes more than we say no. I think a lot of times we talk about work life and work life balance and work life integration and work life fulfillment, and we say, just say no and set boundaries. But a lot of times the counterintuitive way to think about finding passion is to say yes. So there's a new opportunity. Oh my gosh, reach for it. There's a problem that you see that is frustrating. Reach for the solution to that. Take initiative, lean in. I think that can absolutely be part of finding our passion, is if we say yes more often in a reasonable way so that we're not totally overwhelming ourselves. If we say yes more often, we get to try more things. And variety can give us the opportunity to figure out where our passion is and what might give us energy in our current environment. And the variety itself can drive that energy. I think the other thing, as we think about finding our passion, creating passionate experiences, is to think about what energizes us. Like, sometimes those are things within our work environment, sometimes those are things outside of the work environment in community endeavors or voluntary endeavors, but really walking toward, focusing on, moving toward the things that energize us, things that give us energy, things that we're motivated to put energy into. That vitality is an element of how we feel happiness at work or joy or passion at work.
So we have to ditch the illusions and focus on what really matters, living a fulfilling life.
Yes, absolutely. Ditch the illusions. I love that. I think the other thing we have to do actually is to lower our expectations. That sounds counterintuitive as well. But one of the things that happens with the popular press is that we tend to think that we should always be happy all the time, every minute. And if we make the right choice about a job or where we're going to live or our partner, we'll always be happy every minute. But that's a myth. Every choice that we make is a set of conditions. There'll be things we love about our job and things that we're not nuts about, things we love about the place that we live, things that we love about our partner, but maybe some things that annoy us here and there if we're honest. So I think that's the other thing, is to realize that it's okay if we're not, bonbons and butterflies every minute. It's okay if we have ups and downs and ebbs and flows. We can empower ourselves to create the conditions for happiness, even if every single minute of every single day isn't, joyful and, springing through the daisies.
Absolutely. Well, that brings me my story here. And I'm sorry if I'm bringing too much of my personal growth stories. However, I remember I was really feeling part of the organization. It was a small family company. And I was so excited because the owner decided to take me on a tour through Europe. I was going from Poland to Belgium. We were going in his brand new Toyota Discovery, and it felt really, really great until we ended up in a hotel, and he said he's getting one room for both of us. Now, that was a really big wake-up call, because then everything is like in a movie. You remember that moment when the secretary looked at you and said, "Oh, you're going with the boss to this tour," and so on. And it kind of all went into weird movie that nobody warned me what I should expect from my boss. But then on the other hand, this really gave me opportunity to grow, and also gave me opportunity to set boundaries very, very fast. But also I knew that, well, this is not a company I want to be with, because if the boss thinks that he can have this holidays with me, that's not really a company I would like to be part of. So to those who may suffer sexual harassment, it happened to me over 20 years ago. What would be your suggestion how to set boundaries and still enjoy your work?
Oh, gosh. What an experience, Beata. That's incredible. And I know it's not something that others haven't been through as well. So huge, huge empathy toward people who've gone through that. I think you're so right about setting the boundaries, about absolutely saying no, about absolutely making other choices in terms of where you will work, or how you will set the boundary to continue working in that place until you can find something else. I think those are absolutely things to consider. And I think the other thing is that sometimes in those situations, And I'm not an expert on this topic, so full disclosure. But sometimes in those situations, I think we can tend to blame ourselves, like, oh, what did I do to bring this on? And I think we need to be really careful not to blame ourselves. That if that's happening, that is a fundamental flaw with that person in expecting those kinds of outcomes. And it's a fundamental flaw in the culture that allows that person to continue with that behavior. So absolutely reinforcing and validating your own choices, your own boundaries, and being very, very firm about those are really, really things to think about.
I thank you very much, Tracy. I have a very speedy lesson on that because obviously, as you say, it's very difficult to terminate your contract when you have a little child at home and you have to still go to work because you have to earn money until you find another job to make sure that you provide for your child. However, these are the times that you feel like this is a nightmare you're living through and nobody wants you. That was really difficult for me to deal with this secretary and the whole, you felt like the whole company's eyes are on you because you agreed to that, even though you had no idea that it's going to happen, right? So as you said, that was a vast opportunity to grow, a lesson to learn from. And again, sometimes life is going to throw unexpected things. And rather than dwell on that, you have to pick up yourself and find better job, better purpose, better fulfilling life.
It's so true. And I think one of the things we can do is really remind ourselves that when we go through hard times, we actually build our resilience. There's wonderful research that when you go through something hard, you build your capability to go through the next thing. And not that we're looking for hard things to go through, but there's a beautiful concept of post-traumatic growth. We all know about PTSD and the chronic issues that brings. There is also a thing called post-traumatic growth. When you go through something really hard, number one, you get a brand new, renewed sense of your capabilities. You come through and you say to yourself, oh my gosh, that was so hard. I never would have thought I could get through that. But you get a renewed sense of your capabilities, number one. Number two, you get a very clear sense of your priorities. When you're going through something really hard, everything else kind of falls away and you get this crystal clear sense of what you need to be focused on. In your example, right? You're focused on making a living for your child and making sure that the choices you make and the way that you muscle through are going to allow for that, making a living for you and your child. The third thing that you get in post-traumatic growth is you get a really clear sense of who your people are. You absolutely know those vital few people who are going to support you, stick with you. It might be one or two people. It might be one person, but you absolutely know who you can count on. So capabilities, priorities, and your people, those can be some things that you come through with on the other side, in addition to this muscle of resilience that you're building.
You touched upon a very important topic, which we're going to talk about later, the network and the power of building your tribe. However, you mentioned before we came online about how to recognize a toxic boss. So tell us, let's tap into that, even though we are going to bring lots of positivity. However, there are some warning signs. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, there are warning signs. And sometimes it's, like blinking lights and neon lights, like in your example, right? Other times it might be that funny sense of discomfort that you have around someone. It might be when you get the email and you don't even want to open it because it just might be a zinger. Sometimes you can see toxicity in terms of an uneven treatment of people. I reported to somebody one time in a situation, and he was wonderful to me. He was empowering and appropriate and really, really developmental and all the good things. but he treated this other person on the team terribly. And so that was another signal, right? Like you want somebody who is predictable, who is somebody that you can count on, who will display similar behaviors to similar people in similar situations. So that predictability is a big deal. And that unpredictability can be a red flag. I think another red flag is when people are de-energizing, right? Like when somebody is constantly being overcritical or more likely to kind of take away from the idea that you've put forward rather than build on it. And I think the other thing about toxic bosses is we have to give grace as well, right? Like we all make mistakes. We are all imperfect. We are all doing our best. And just because somebody said something that you didn't agree with doesn't mean they're toxic. So I also think it's another example of balance where we want to pay attention. We want to check in. We want to validate our own experiences and make good choices based on our own experiences. And we need to have the ability to be imperfect and give others the opportunity to be imperfect and learn together when those are appropriate conditions to do that.
Beautiful, beautifully said. Opportunities for growth and fulfillment. Keep an open mind, explore different paths, because I think also you touched upon that. We tend to jump to conclusions. Oh, this is a toxic person. There is so much negative feedback I'm getting, whereas we could look at things from a different perspective. How to deal, and this is my question to you, Tracy, how to deal with feedback and bring the positives into place.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I think one of the things we can do a better job of is really looking for opinions that don't agree with our own. The algorithms work too well today. We tend to be served through social media and through our live streams and our feeds. We tend to be served information that already agrees with what we think. And we can have an unrealistic understanding of the views in the world that are all similar to ours. And so it's a really good idea when we can look for contrary opinions, when we can look for differences of opinion, when we can seek to learn from people who feel differently than we do and kind of assume that we don't have all the answers. We might be awfully smart or awfully confident, but we don't have to flip over into arrogance, right? We want to stay with humility and say to ourselves, what am I not thinking of? What does this person have to offer me? And sometimes that comes in the form of feedback to your question. So I think when we get feedback, it's so important that we think about, what about this makes sense? In what way can I understand this feedback as helpful to me? Even if I don't agree with all of it, what are the nuggets of truth that might help me to continuously improve? And I think when we're giving feedback to other people, we always want to consider what are their goals and what are the ways that we might be helpful in giving feedback? Because feedback is a gift and feedback is a risk, right? Like we step out and take a risk in the relationship when we give somebody feedback. So it's definitely a two-way street, and we can definitely learn, continuously improve, and know that we'll never have all the answers. And there'll always be somebody who has something to offer us that we can learn from.
Well, feedback is a powerful tool also in networking. And you had a great article about having a coffee recently on Forbes. So tell us about how to build your confidence, how to have a coffee, and how to grab a coffee to pick somebody's brain and get feedback.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That was such a fun article to write. I think sometimes we think about networking coffee chats as, that's a nice to have, or that might be a little bit fluffy, but it is lifeblood in terms of building networks. And there are the elements of a coffee chat where you're building your network. That's a person that you can learn from. That's a person you can get advice from. That's a person that might be able to connect you to somebody else later when you're looking for your next career opportunity. But also it is about the fulfillment of that connection, right? Like we feel more fulfilled when we feel connection. 50% of people globally say that they experience loneliness, say that they don't have friends, they don't feel as connected to their coworkers as they would like. And so that quick coffee chat, that half hour of, hey, asking for advice, asking about lessons learned, asking about how did you get through the barrier, those are really, really great opportunities to get to know somebody, to get to know their perspectives, to understand their journey in a way that can benefit your journey as well. And so that networking piece is about, what can I get? It can be helpful to me in my next career choices and my career journey, but also what can I give? And in what ways can we increase our connection with each other and our relationship with each other?
Dr. Tracy, you're definitely a prime example of network builder, because when I look at your profile on LinkedIn, you've got so many connections. However, is it easy to connect with you, or do you have some form of approving people who want to reach out to you, or do you just welcome anybody, even if it means you may be inundated with lots of cold calls?
I'm always open to connections. Absolutely. And here's something else that I actually said in the article as well. I think we can tell the difference if somebody's just trying to sell us something versus if they actually want to connect and have kind of mutual learning. So I am very open. I'm pretty much an open book, so people can absolutely reach out. I'm always willing to do the speaking engagement or do the one-on-one. I had this wonderful example. Somebody reached out to me recently. He's a student in the US and he's from Pakistan. And he wanted to do a session together on empathy virtually in Pakistan. And it's like, that's such a great opportunity, right? For us to come together and offer some mutual learning. So it was just, I think that's a great example of, I've got lots of openness to those connections and lots of openness to kind of that mutual learning that can occur.
Wow. So what did you learn from the student about empathy?
It was so interesting. He said that he felt like our culture was actually more empathetic than what he had been used to at home, just in his personal experience. He wasn't being evaluative of countries or belief systems or anything like that, but he said, gosh, my personal experience has been more empathetic here. And so he really wanted to think about, how do you scale empathy? How do you model empathy? How do you train for empathy? And so I think it was just a wonderful example of a growth mentality and wonderful learning about growth mentality, that none of us have it all figured out. We can always improve on empathy and everything else. And so how do we bring the ideas about any concept, empathy as an example, to bear? How do we bring those concepts to others? How do we scale? How do we expand? How do we extend those concepts and those ideas? So for me, that was wonderful learning that he was taking so much initiative. And he's so young. He's in high school. It's like, wow, very cool that he is empowered to take that action.
That's beautiful that you're helping figure out the life in the US, and contributing your own time. So since we are talking about work-life balance, how do you avoid burnout?
That is an important question. There is new data nationwide. This was actually US data, it's not global data, but 98% of Gen Zs said that they felt burned out. Like, that's just shocking, right? That's amazing. How are we supporting Gen Zs? In what ways are we supporting any of us at any age to make sure that we are avoiding burnout? Burnout is super related to depression. There's a kind of a Venn diagram of overlap in terms of burnout and depression. That's one thing to know. The other thing is that burnout tends to be defined as three things. When we feel burnout, we feel cynicism, like, we just feel negative about things, right? We also tend to feel trapped. We feel like there's no place to go and there's kind of nothing that we want to go toward in terms of our current experience. And burnout is also characterized by feeling ineffective, Like you show up, you do your best, and you just don't feel like you get anywhere. You just don't feel like you're doing enough or effective enough. And so there are a few things that we can do about that. One is that we can look for learning and growth opportunities. I mentioned that when we stretch, when we learn, when we're challenged, that's highly correlated with happiness. And so when we're feeling ineffective, if we look for new opportunities to grow, if we look for new things that we can learn, that is actually really, really helpful. That also is helpful in that idea of feeling trapped. Like the more we can learn about new opportunities, the more we can lean in or take initiative, that can help us with that feeling of being trapped. The other thing then is towards cynicism. What do we do about that? Sometimes that has to do with choosing your network and choosing the people that you want to be around. There was another global study. This was maybe about a year and a half ago or so. And people were asked, how have your networks changed? And lots of folks said, my network has gotten smaller and tighter. And I have made some really intentional choices about who I spend time with. And I'm really choosy about spending time with people who I can provide contribution to, who tend to energize me, who tend to be the people who nurture or nourish me. So I think that's the other thing we can do as we think about burnout is think about our tribe, think about our people, think about who we're spending time with. The people who can give us tough feedback and help move us forward, the people who can give us safe haven support and kind of be there no matter what, the people who are new UN friends that we may not have seen in a while, but represent continuity in our life and in our career. Those are people who can be helpful. So thinking about learning, stretching, leaning in, thinking about exploring new opportunities, and thinking about making connections can all be really helpful in terms of burnout.
That's beautiful advice. Quality people only in your network, but also being able to reach out to those who may not be in your immediate network because you may need their feedback, their help. And there are some great advice, and I encourage everybody to reach out to our previous episode with Kelly Howie, who talked all about network. She's a networking expert, so I would encourage you to do that. We have got a great question from Natalie, who's, as she mentioned, you're her favorite guest. How does someone balance practical skills with passion? Is it possible to blend the two, or should they be viewed separately?
What an interesting question. That would be very cool to write an article about. But when I say write an article, it doesn't mean I have it figured out. It means I want to think more about it. I think practical skills and passion can absolutely go together and be side by side. So practical skills, we want to learn, we want to grow. We need practical skills that will benefit us through our career. And passion is about the things that energize us. So I think we're always looking for the overlaps between those. We'll never have perfect overlap, right? Like we're going to have a job where there's things that energize us and things that are never like, expense reports. Like those are never like high energy opportunities, right? We do good work and we do integrous work with our expense reports, but they're not the thing that's going to light us on fire. I think the other thing to think about in terms of passion is the concept of dimensionality. I love this idea that the more things that you have in your life that give you meaning, the more elements of your life that you feel a sense of identity from, the better. So you have work that you like to do and you're developing. You have community work that you enjoy and you're developing. You do volunteer work. You spend time with extended family members. Those are all examples of dimensionality. And when we can invest time in those, that's a big deal. Here's something else that's surprising. When you invest time in something that energizes you, you tend to perceive that you have more time. Like we all are stretched thin. There's so many great things to do, right? And so many demands on our time. But ironically, when you invest time in things that energize you, it tends to pay you back in terms of your perception of having more time. Here's the other thing about dimensionality. It works really well when there's overlap in what you enjoy. So maybe there's somebody who owns an art gallery and she, curates the art in the art gallery, but she also loves to hike. And when she hikes, she finds elements of nature that really inspire her for the next artwork that she's going to do. And she loves to do pottery. So she integrates those elements of nature, I don't know, the pine cone, the leaf that she found while she was hiking, into her pottery. And then she brings that into her gallery. So that's a great example of that overlap, right? Like I've got an art gallery. I love to hike. I love to do pottery. Those things come together. So when we have dimensionality and differences in what we're doing in life, that works brilliantly. And when we have overlaps in what we love to do, that also works really well.
And if we add to that dimensionality a pattern of being curious, that's really a match made in heaven.
Yes, exactly. You bet. There's a wonderful book you asked me about ahead of time called Curious by Ian Leslie. And I just love it. It's the idea of different kinds of curiosity, different levels of curiosity. We can be broadly curious. We can be really, really focused on curiosity. And this actually comes back to the concept of empathy as well, right? We can be curious about things and theories and research. We can be curious about our jobs. We can lean into what we want to learn next, but we can also be curious about people. What makes them tick? What makes them unique? What causes them to kind of bring specific gifts to their work? That curiosity about people is the basis for empathy, right? Because the more we understand what somebody might be thinking, what somebody might be feeling, emotional empathy, cognitive empathy, those actually drive great relationships, and great relationships are fundamentally connected to a sense of happiness. So curiosity works on lots of different levels.
And I'm a great advocate for leadership skills, and that's also a huge part of building your leadership skills, which are critical for any female's career. And speaking about dimensionality, and that's a big word, we have got Rashlyn who's asking another question: how to have a good relationship with your co-workers and feel fulfilled at work?
Oh, such a good one. Such a good one. I think a really big part of having good relationships with coworkers has to do with time and investment. Like we know that friendship is based on having 60 hours of investment with people, 60. Like you build a friendship over time. And so work can be a really great place to build friendship because we have so much proximity and connection to each other. Like we worked on the project for an hour on Tuesday and we met again on Thursday for another hour. And then we had coffee on, the next week. We've got that automatic time built in to start to get to know each other. So working together on task is a really good way to build relationships. It's kind of a misnomer that team building happens best through social experiences. Social experiences are good. So, go to your mixology class, go to your rope climbing class, go to your escape room. But the more important way that we tend to bond is over task. We roll up sleeves. We have to depend on somebody else. We're solving problems together. So working together on task is a really great way to build relationship. Another really great way to build relationship is through just getting to know people personally. And we don't need to go to TMI. We don't need to be invasive, but just getting to know them. Like maybe they're moving, or maybe they just got a new puppy, or, oh my gosh, what's happening with their children or their nieces or nephews. The more we get to know people, the more we tend to accept them. We have a cognitive bias toward familiarity. It's called the familiarity bias, or relatedly, it's called the recency bias. The more we know about somebody, the more data that we have about them, the more we tend to accept them. Like, oh, we just kind of get where they're coming from, or we saw them walk in with a scowl in the morning and we kind of know what's going on, or we kind of know they're going through a really tough project right now. So when we ask questions, when we get to know people, when we invest time in just being curious and learning about people, that's a great way to build relationships as well. And I think the last thing, lots more things, but the last thing I'll say at the moment is when we look for common ground with people, when we look for the things that we are both interested in, or we look for the things that make both of us laugh, or we look for the music that we tend to both like or both dislike, those can be wonderful opportunities to build a relationship as well, looking for that common ground, that common language.
Because none of us are able to achieve success without help along the way. So speaking about success and who helped you shape your career as it is, who are you grateful for, and what did this person contribute to in terms of your career, Tracy?
Oh my gosh, so many people I'm grateful for. So many people have been shaping in my career. My very first boss was amazing. I joined him and worked with him right out of college. And he gave me so many opportunities and pushed me and supported me to take risks. He would have me lead meetings probably before I was ready, right? But he'd push me and give me feedback and give me coaching. We worked at a manufacturing organization, and he insisted that I work on third shift in the production area on the production line on third shift for 3 weeks. And it was the most amazing learning in terms of understanding the business, in terms of understanding and being empathetic toward lots of different kinds of roles that people do. That was one of the things that he carved out in terms of giving me time and coaching and feedback. And this is the best part. So this is years, decades ago that I worked with him. And I just had to be, he moved, and I just had to be in his neck of the woods for a business trip. And I looked him up. I happen to know his wife and a couple of his kids in the process all those years ago as well. So I looked him up, and I had, iced tea with he and his wife. It was the most wonderful thing years later, decades later, to stay connected and to, just come together and be reminded, oh my gosh, I appreciated him then. And I really, really appreciate him now as well.
That's great to have these people who can support you, who want to support you, who want to make you succeed. But definitely communication skills were critical to get them know you, get them what tickles, what is really the substance of Tracy. And we've had this familiarity bias, as you said, because we had you here. It's the third time you're speaking to us. However, I wondered if you have anything to say differently about your life lesson quote.
Oh, there are so many good quotes. One of my favorites is Robert Brault, and he says, "Enjoy the little things in life, because someday you'll realize they are the big things." I just think that says so much about presence, about mindfulness, about hope, about gratitude. And actually, gratitude is super correlated with happiness. When we have an intentional sense of what we're grateful for and what's going well for us, that's absolutely correlated with joy. Not in a toxic positivity way. We can also be realistic, of course, but really appreciating what we have is a big deal in terms of it. And so that quote speaks to me about that.
Enjoying the little things, even look at the positive, even if some days you have to look a bit harder, as we like to say. So gratitude, what is your way of practicing gratitude, Tracy?
I tend to think in the morning pretty consciously, like, what am I grateful for today? Or what might happen today that will be positive? And I think it's really helpful, like before you go to bed at night, to think about what makes you grateful, just to kind of make that little list. Sometimes we make to-do lists, and sometimes I think it's really helpful if we make to-done lists, like what did I accomplish today? Another thing that is a great idea is to think consciously about who you were grateful for in terms of people, or, somebody that kind of paid attention, or somebody that asked you a question, or somebody that checked in with you. People can be a really important element of that gratitude. Interestingly, when we invest in experiences, that tends to be more correlated with happiness than if we invest in things. When we are grateful for capabilities, people, situations, that actually tends to move the needle a little bit more than when we're grateful for things. And so we want to think broadly about what are those conditions, what are those situations, what are those capabilities, what are those hopes that we can be grateful for on a regular basis.
It's a valid point, because in the world of instant gratification, when we are surrounded by social media telling us, you've got to have more and faster, and faster cars, better phones, and marketing world is speaking volumes about, you can't really live fulfilling life without this newest phone model. That's really gives you a thought and a focus on the things you have that are really meaningful. So if you could give our listeners one bold challenge or a piece of actionable advice to help them make their career more fulfilling and their work more fulfilling, what would it be? How can they start implementing this today to see real progress in their professional journey?
Yeah, I think it's two things. I think we are super smart to accept the downs along with the ups. Like your point, right, is happiness adaptation, or hedonic inflation, hedonic adaptation. That is the idea that we think we have to get happier, happier, happier all the time. And we have to kind of understand that we will have ups and downs, and give ourselves permission for the downs as much as the ups, and not just chase happiness for its own sake, but create the conditions for happiness. The things we've talked about: learning, stretch, connection, purpose, gratitude, performance, leaning in. So really, instead of just chasing happiness for its own sake, instead of looking for more, more, more all the time, being focused on what we have gratitude for what we have, and really create those conditions for happiness. So that's one, is to relieve the pressure on ourselves for more, more, more all the time. I think the other thing is to lean in, to say yes, to take initiative. There's all this crazy stuff about quiet quitting, and, lazy girl jobs, and, minimalist Mondays where we're just going to lay around on the couch. But actually, it's a big deal when we feel like we're making a contribution, when we're putting energy into something that contributes to our esteem. It contributes to our feeling of being part of a community. It contributes to our sense of joy. It contributes to our sense of identity and dimensionality. So my other actionable advice, in addition to relieving the pressure, is to say yes, take initiative, really, really lean in terms of doing your best every day.
Doing your best every day, growth mentality. And speaking of dreaming and pushing boundaries, we always ask this question about: imagine you could travel anywhere in the world and have a private breakfast with anybody in the world. So now is your ask whoever is listening. Maybe they will listen to you and have that private breakfast. Who would you invite, and where would you go to?
So many people. This is such a hard question, but I would love to have breakfast with Warren Buffett. We've got this little kind of diner place in town. It's called the Windmill Restaurant. They've got the best breakfasts ever. But I would love to hear from Warren Buffett about leadership, about, kind of continuity of leadership over time, about kind of a minimalist perspective that we read about in terms of his approach, about his long relationships with other leaders. Those would be wonderful things to learn from him.
Beautiful. We have comment from Patrick who says, hedonic inflation. I love that phrase. I think we have had too much hedonic quantitative easing in recent years. Back to basics on gratitude. Absolutely. Well, speaking about Warren Buffett, did you hear about that? And I really appreciate that fact, because he actually apparently, when his daughter asked him for money for her kitchen renovation, he said, apply to the bank for a loan.
That's empowering.
That is empowering, but also on the other hand, if you imagine how much money she's getting from him on a monthly basis, and still she could not save money for her kitchen renovation, that is really telling, isn't it?
It is. It's about accountability. It's about ownership. It's about responsibility, right? And I think we are more empowered when we take that kind of ownership and responsibility, for sure.
For sure, hedonic inflation is the theme of today's discussion. Choose a job you love, and you will never have to work a day in your life, as Confucius says, and I love that quote. And Abraham Lincoln says, things may come to those who wait, but only the things left by those who hustle. Tracy, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us. Again, your work is not only brilliant, inspirational, and we are still waiting for another book. Hopefully there will be some other topic for our discussion, but in the meantime we will be happy to welcome you again to our Positivity Hack Deliver. And that's it from episode 156 of PhD Livestream. Thanks to our guest, Dr. Tracy Brower. To stay updated and ensure you never miss a Positivity Hack Delivered, follow Woman on It and turn on notifications to be alerted once a video has been released. Next week, guest Elaine Montilla, we're going to talk about breaking walls, building bridges, a Latina's journey in tech. Thank you so much for our great audience today. Questions, Olga Vasina, Patrick Young, Rashlyn Angsoy. And thank you once again, Dr. Tracy. It's been a joy to have you again, inspiring us to push further and be a better version of ourselves.
Thank you.
Finally, if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude, as Maya Angelou says. Today is your day to hug the future. Hug the positivity you want. Thank you.